Ballparks aren't meant to last forever, yet some of them do. Not in concrete and steel, but in memory. They age much like people do. They fade, they crumble, and they disappear. But somewhere between memory and imagination, an ideal version survives, preserved by those who once passed through their gates. Baseball's venues are shaped by human forces, landscapes, politics, and economics. But over time, that influence reverses. What was once shaped by those forces eventually begins to shape the human experience in return. A building made for baseball becomes something larger than the game itself. No ballpark has ever left an imprint quite like the house that Ruth built. For 85 seasons, this stadium stood as an epicenter for American culture and a testament to the spirit of the Bronx. From Murderer's Row to Reggie Jackson's 3 in a row. From the luckiest man on the face of the earth to George Bush's perfect strike. Welcome back to The Bad Baseball Fan. Let's explore the mythic history of Yankee Stadium. If you enjoy deep dives into old stadiums like this, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss anything from The Bad Baseball Fan. When the 1912 season wrapped up, the New York Highlanders, finishing at 50, 102, and 1, found themselves suddenly homeless. Their lease had run out, and their decade-long tenure at Hilltop Park ended, leaving them scrambling for a new venue. Luckily, the nearby New York Giants came to the rescue, offering shelter in their newly renovated Polo grounds. When the move happened, the local press decided it was time for the team to change names, and chose one that would stick: the Yankees. The Yankees had a rough start at the Polo Grounds, finishing with losing seasons in each of their first 2 years there while drawing mediocre attendance numbers. This placed tremendous financial pressure on team owners William S. Devery and Frank J. Farrell, leading them to sell the ball club ahead of the 1915 season. For a total somewhere north of $350,000, Jacob Rubert and Tillius Longmeadow Houston purchased the New York Yankees. And almost immediately, the two began making plans to build the team their own ballpark. Their efforts to find a proper location took longer than expected, and further delays came when the U.S. entered World War I in 1917. Under the stewardship of the new ownership pair, the Yankees' fortunes on the field began to improve. Despite the overall better play, they let manager Bill Donovan go following the 1917 season. Under the recommendation of AL president Ban Johnson, Rupert interviewed St. Louis Cardinals manager Miller Huggins, and despite his preference for the Dodgers' Wilbert Robinson, hired Huggins to head his ball club. Further moves to improve the team followed in 1919, when the Yankees purchased pitcher Carl Mays and outfielder Babe Ruth from their soon-to-be rival Red Sox. We won't dive too deep into it now, but that deal to acquire the Babe would prove disastrous for Boston. Red Sox owner Harry Frazee sold the greatest ballplayer alive to finance a Broadway production. History would judge it as one of sport's worst ever transactions. The moves to land players like Mays and Ruth had immediate, tangible results. Finishing with a solid 80, 59, and 2 record in 1919, a year later, the Yankees surged to 95 and 59 for third place, and led the league in attendance with 1.28 million fans seeing their games. It was easy to see why, too. With Babe Ruth making the transition to a full-time outfielder, he nearly doubled his own home run record, smashing 54 for the season. The Giants also led the National League in attendance, but they drew less than 1 million fans, far below the Yankees' nearly 1.3 million. This drove a deep wedge between the two ball clubs, with the Giants, especially manager John McGraw, growing increasingly resentful towards their tenants from the American League. Tensions rose to the point that the Giants served an eviction notice to the Yankees in the middle of the season, claiming they had to vacate following the 1920 campaign. The two sides worked out an agreement to allow the Yankees to stay up for 2 more seasons, but the clock had started ticking. The following season followed an eerily similar track on the field, with the Yankees improving to 98-55, winning their first pennant and leading the league in attendance with another massive 1.23 million fans coming to their games. Their bitter landlord, the Giants, led the league in attendance again as well, with 973,000 fans, and won the pennant with a 94-59 record. Just like that, the two teams in Harlem were meeting in the World Series. The second inter-city and 18th overall Fall Classic began on October 5, 1921, with the Giants presuming the role as home team for Game 1. It was set to be a best-of-9 series, and given the all-Polo Grounds nature of this championship series, the teams were set to alternate home and away status every game. The Yankees took the first 2 games in the fashion of 3-0 shutouts. Despite the 2-0 hole, the Giants didn't back down, winning games 3 and 4 before dropping Game 5 and winning the next 3 to close out the series and claim the championship. The finish on the field wasn't ideal, but the Yankees did manage to claim their first pennant. More importantly, off the field, team owners Rupert and Houston had begun scouting out potential locations for a new ballpark early in the year. They settled on an old 12.5-acre lumberyard in the Bronx, adjacent to McCombs Dam Park, and owned by the estate of the recently deceased William Waldorf Astor. The site was ideal because it was within clear view of Coogan's Bluff across the river. On May 16th, Rupert and Houston closed the deal for their property at a cost of $675,000, equivalent to roughly $12.1 million in 2026. With grand designs in their minds, they hired the legendary Osborne Engineering Company to design what they imagined to be a fully enclosed, triple-deck, 75,000-seat venue. So grand would it be that the monikers of field or ballpark wouldn't do it justice. A venue so marvelous would require something with a little more gravitas. Invoking the racetracks of ancient Greece, Rupert chose a different word: stadium. Yankee Stadium. On May 5th, 1922, the Yankees beat the Athletics 5-4 at Shibe Park in Philadelphia to improve their hot start to 13-7. At the same time, back at that old lumber mill in the Bronx, ground broke on a new stadium. Osborne Engineering ended up charging Rupert and Houston $223,000, or roughly $4.4 million in 2026. Several logistical problems caused construction to lag, dealing with labor strikes and supply delays. Because of this, the dream of having a field fully surrounded by 3 tiers of seating had to be scrapped. The final plans ended up with a smaller than anticipated mezzanine, with the second and third decks ending around the foul poles, and the lower deck seating still extending all the way around the field. But after the alterations, the capacity was dropped to 58,000. White Construction Company was hired to bring the plans into reality. For the concrete facade, they purchased roughly 35,000 cubic yards of concrete from the Edison Portland Cement Company, founded by Thomas Edison. The copper frieze that would adorn the top of the third deck was fashioned on-site by White Construction, using material purchased from the UT Hungerford Brass and Copper Company of New York. The frieze hung roughly 16 feet from the roof and eventually became one of the most iconic features of the stadium. The field itself was expansive and quite asymmetrical, with the intent that the facility be used for sporting events beyond baseball as well. Short down the lines at 280 feet in left field and 295 feet in right field, Yankee Stadium featured a cavernous left center field that quickly garnered the telling nickname Death Valley. Dead center stood at a jaw-dropping 487 feet, while the deepest part of left field reached an enormous 500 feet from home plate. A dirt track was also added that surrounded the playing surface. Built with the intent of hosting track and field events, this track would go on to be baseball's first warning track. As construction proceeded in the Bronx, over in Harlem, the Yanks were having another phenomenal season. Finishing with a 94-60 record, they claimed their second consecutive American League pennant, leading the league in attendance once again, with just over 1 million coming to their games at the Polo grounds. Their landlord Giants featured a repeat campaign of their own, finishing 93, 61, and 2, earning the National League pennant and leading the NL in attendance with just under 946,000. Setting up a Subway Series rematch, the 1922 World Series started on October 4th, with the home and away format the same as it was the year prior. This series was shortened to a best of 7, and the Giants made quick work of it, sweeping the Yankees in what would be a 5-game series thanks to a 3-3 tie in Game 2. And just like that, the Yankees' decade-long tenure at the Polo grounds came to an abrupt, disappointing end. Despite coming up short for a second year in a row, the future was blindingly bright. They packed their bags and waited patiently for their new ballpark across the river to be ready to welcome them. As the spring of 1923 rapidly approached, it was becoming increasingly apparent that the stadium would be ready, but not quite in time for the scheduled beginning of the season. Yankee ownership pleaded with AL President Ban Johnson to push opening day back a week for the league, and he acquiesced. The inaugural game at baseball's grand new venue was scheduled to take place on April 18th against none other than the Boston Red Sox. Speaking of Yankees ownership, Rupert and Houston had not been getting along for a while over a disagreement over the viability of Miller Huggins as manager. Rupert, insisting Huggins was the man for the job, won the argument. And before the season started, Houston sold his shares to Rupert, who became the sole proprietor of the New York Yankees. Houston did stay on to oversee the opening of the stadium, a project he had been working on for years. The inaugural game day was full of tremendous fanfare. Relatively new MLB Commissioner Kennesaw Mountain Landis arrived at the game via a new subway line near the ballpark, while New York Governor Al Smith threw out the first pitch. Even legendary American conductor John Philip Sousa played a role, leading the 7th Regiment Band in the pregame rendition of the Star-Spangled Banner. Official attendance was listed as 74,200, but it's likely that the number was actually around 60,000 instead. Either way, Yankee Stadium's first ballgame obliterated MLB's single-game attendance record of 42,620, set during the 1916 World Series at Fenway Park in Boston. Bob Shockey took the mound for the Yankees, and at 3:30 p.m., he threw out the first pitch in the history of Yankee Stadium. It took until the 4th inning for either team to score, when in the bottom of the inning, Joe Dugan singled the right center to drive in pitcher Bob Shockey. With Dugan on first and Whitey Witt on third, Babe Ruth stepped up to the plate and ripped a home run over to Ruthville, the short porch down the right field line. Some sources have described the home run as a line drive, while others described it as a towering shot. The New York Times referred to it as a savage home run that was the real baptism of Yankee Stadium. Fittingly, it was Ruth who delivered the first blast, in a ballpark soon to be known as the house that Ruth built. Up 4-0, the Yankees wouldn't score again, but they didn't need to. Shockey dominated on the mound, pitching a complete game and allowing a single Red Sox run to cross in the 7th. The day was a resounding success. Amidst all the fanfare, the Yankees defeated their rivals. The Bambino baptized the ballpark against his former team, and the stadium shattered the previous Major League single-game attendance record. An estimated 25,000 more were turned away at the gates. At a total cost of $2.5 million, Yankee Stadium proved with her inaugural game that she would be well worth the investment. It had taken 10 years of eviction notices, humiliation, and ambition. Now, the Yankees had a cathedral, and cathedrals demand champions. Thank you for watching The Bad Baseball Fan. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the origins of Yankee Stadium, consider subscribing and join me for part 2.